Hey, what's up, everybody? So, today we got another Metal Gear Solid 5 theories, and I know it's been a while since I've done one of these videos, but I really wish they would release some new trailers or something, give me something more to talk about, but today's going to be a little bit different than my usual videos, because it's not going to focus so much on, like, things we don't know about, like, to try to figure out things about characters so much. It's more of a trying to understand the kind of story and theme, or possible story and theme, of this new Metal Gear Solid game. And today I'm going to be talking about basically the fall of Big Boss. And this is basically going to go into how I think Big Boss is kind of like, he's definitely going to change in this game. I feel like this game's going to deal a lot with him kind of, you know, becoming the big boss that becomes like the bad guy in the first two Metal Gear games. Now, I know that he's not really a bad guy, and I don't like to put that label on him, because nobody in Metal Gear Solid, like, the way the story goes and the way that, like, the characters are so in-depth that even when they do bad things, they have reasons for it. It's like there's no clear-cut, like, good guy, bad guy type thing. Everybody is just kind of a moral gray area, and these people find themselves against each other on the battlefield. But I kind of want to go into how Big Boss becomes the antagonist in the first two Metal Gear games, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. And I think this game's really going to depict how he falls into that role, because the first two Metal Gear games, we don't really, like, a lot of people probably haven't played those games because they're so old. Also, because of their age, the storytelling is kind of limited. And I'm not saying they're bad games or anything by any means, because I think they're really good games, but they're very limited. So we don't really, like, I did a full Let's Play of the first Metal Gear game recently, and, like, story-wise, it doesn't have as much depth as, say, like Metal Gear Solid or any of the later ones, like on the PlayStation and up. It just doesn't have the depth of story and the, like, so many characters and everyone's individual, and, like, trying to understand it. It does have, like, a good overall story and kind of like a twist ending and everything, but you definitely don't get as much, like, story elements from that game. However, I will give Metal Gear Solid props, because they try to basically tie in older games, like, or newer games, they try to tie back to the older games and really try to explain story elements that that weren't really in the games but were there, kind of like in Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation. They talk a lot about what happened in the first two Metal Gears, explaining different things in a more story-driven type way, as opposed to the way that they're presented in the older formats. So, you know, you got to give them props on that. But because of those limitations, we don't really get to see Big Boss as the bad guy so much as we see him as the good guy in the newer games. Because, think about it, Metal Gear Solid 3, pretty much Metal Gear Solid 3, Portable Ops, Peace Walker, even Metal Gear Solid 4, Big Boss is seen more as a good guy, like, doing good things. Like, he's in the first three games I mentioned, he's the protagonist. He's the main character. He's the one you understand the best. You're rooting for him to win. Even in Metal Gear Solid 4, when you see Big Boss again, you don't get the feeling that he's a bad guy anymore. It seems like he's trying to kind of repent for all the sins he committed, and so on and so forth. So he doesn't really portray that kind of bad guy-esque, like, type character. But I think Metal Gear Solid 5 is really going to show how he ends up being the antagonist in the first two Metal Gears. And to really understand my thoughts on this and how it all works out, we really got to just kind of go and break down Big Boss's history. I mean, the first and biggest event in Big Boss's life is actually how he became Big Boss. He had to go on Operation Snake Eater, which ended up pitting him against his master, the person who took him in, who taught him how to be a soldier, taught him how to do everything. And they have a very complex relationship, him and the boss. He describes her as she was like my mother and my master. I mean, he remembers down to the damn hour the last time they saw each other. So I mean, they have a very tight-knit relationship, and honestly, he feels betrayed because she defected to the Soviet Union. I think he feels more so betrayed that she didn't ask him to come with her. It's like, I'm your most loyal disciple. Why wouldn't you ask me to help? I mean, that's kind of the feeling I got. But of course, in the end, everything was flipped around, and it wasn't what it appeared to be, because it would appear that Boss betrayed the Americans, defected to the Soviet Union, and became the bad guy of Metal Gear Solid 3, and then Snake, Big Boss, Naked Snake, was forced to kill her at the end of the game, only to find out later that this was all a ruse, and she was just following orders. What had happened was Volgin had fired an American-made nuclear missile at Sokolov's research facility, and pretty much that puts the blame on the Americans. So that could have started it was the Cold War era. I mean, it was a powder keg. One little thing would have set off in a complete war. So what does she do? She takes the blame for it, and it's a claimed defection. So it looks like she was acting alone. So the best way to sell this story is to send her most trusted disciple there to actually eliminate her, and pretty much put a nail in the coffin that she was pure defectant, she was evil, whatever, she was the bad guy. And that was a lot of bullshit. I mean, you understand it, and I respect her for what she did, to make that kind of sacrifice. I mean, I don't know if anybody that could really do that. I mean, she did it just complete out of duty, out of love for her country, even love for her disciple. She pretty much offers herself to Naked Snakes, saying that one of us has to die here. It's because if Snake lets her live, then he's a traitor, so he's gonna get screwed. And I mean, there's no way out. There can only be one boss and one Snake. It's just that type of dilemma. But when he kills her, he becomes Big Boss, and that's how it all begins. That's how his kind of everything just starts to get twisted up. And it's when he finds out the truth, even when he doesn't know the truth, he still feels really bad about what happened, and it eats away at him. And definitely in Peace Walker, you can see this dilemma, because mainly because they're using the boss's memories to create an AI system. But during this whole game, it really brings up he just keeps focusing back on that moment when he had to kill the boss, and it's just tearing him up inside. But this is the defining moment, where you really get to see why Big Boss starts to become what he wants to become. Because in Peace Walker, he establishes the Militaires Sans Frontières, which is Soldiers Without Borders. He does this in a way to kind of create a place for soldiers in the world, because soldiers are constantly being used by countries for religions, countries, any type of sect. I mean, the boss is the prime example that's driving him. The boss was just used, plain up, straight up, simple. She was just used. She was used by the Americans to get out of their little debacle. I mean, and she was just discarded. Nobody cared about her. Nobody knows the truth. Only a few people actually know what really happened, and that's what. So he creates this independent military, this independent kind of army, to basically give soldiers a place where they won't be used, a place where they can fight, where they have use and purpose, and this is where they belong. Because he kind of develops this mentality over the years that he's a soldier and he doesn't belong anywhere else but on the battlefield. He doesn't have another place. That it's what he is. It's what defines him. It's everything about him. And this is where it starts to like kind of turn on him. And I really think Metal Gear Solid 5 is going to kind of fill in the gaps between this and between like Peace Walker and the Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, where Big Boss kind of turns, he becomes more of an extremist in 1 and 2 is what I feel like. Because in Peace Walker, he's established his independent military, but he's not really like aggressive about it, or he's not like pegging enemies or like going out and starting shit. He's just kind of, it's kind of like a PMC, a private military company. He's kind of taking independent jobs based on people who need them, depending on what they need to do. But in Metal Gear Solid 5, like, we know that Outer Heaven gets destroyed. I mean, everything he built just gets torn down by Cypher, and it's just, you start to see how he could start to change after that, because it's like they weren't really picking a fight with anybody. But at the end of Peace Walker, it says the whole world's going to be after us now because they made themselves known. And of course, the world's going to want to crush an independent military force that doesn't represent a country or a nation, because frankly, that could change the game. They could change everything and how soldiers are viewed and used in the world. And it could give countries that don't have a strong military a way to get a military by using these PMCs. And we know in Metal Gear Solid 4 that this eventually does happen, but you kind of see how it all began right here with this one PMC. But after, in Metal Gear Solid 5, we know that Outer Heaven's destroyed. Everything's gone. Everything's been taken away from Big Boss. And like, there's so much there in the trailers that you can kind of feel. Like, even the name Phantom Pain, like having something, like losing something but still feeling like it's there, like that kind of like longing and everything, how it all kind of ties into like a main theme. And one of the things that sticks out to me the most is the shrapnel embedded in Big Boss's head. Now, yes, it looks like it's shrapnel, but it looks kind of like a horn. And that's the kind of, a lot of people have said it looks like a horn. And I think that's on purpose. I think it's meant to be symbolic, because what do you think of when you think of like a person with horns or anything? You think like devil, like bad guy, like demon or something like that. And I think it's symbolic of like Big Boss's kind of more extremist, kind of his dark side starting to emerge because of all the pain and everything he's been through, just kind of changing him. And I think that's what that's supposed to mean. Now, he only has the one horn on the one side, so that too is symbolic, because it's not like most demons have two horns or whatever. So he only has it on one side, symbolizing that he still has himself. It's kind of like a split personality, kind of like a division in extremes of good and evil that are in all people. But I think it's really symbolic the way that they present it. I think it's most clearly depicted probably at the very end of the Metal Gear Solid 5 Red Band trailer. And it's not an actual scene where you see Big Boss, but you just hear audio from the game. But he pretty much just says, he's like, "Cause I'm already a demon." And it's like, you can see it right there, how he starts to feel himself kind of go to that darker side of himself. And it's like, he's kind of accepted it and he's being pulled into it. It's like, it's not like he's trying to fight against his demons. He's embracing himself as a demon. That he is this soldier, this demon on the battlefield that can destroy anybody and doing. It's just like, you really start to see that come out in him. But the difference between like the Peace Walker Big Boss and the Metal Gear Solid 1 Big Boss is how they really changed their views on things. Like the Peace Walker Big Boss, he creates the Militaire Sans Frontières, and he wants to make it's just an independent military for basically giving soldiers a home, like giving them a place to be what they are. But in the future games, Big Boss isn't satisfied with just having like his outer heaven. He wants he wants to plunge the world into constant conflict. Like, that's his ultimate goal, is to create a world that is always a war, because it is human nature to naturally be at conflict, but there are times of peace. And the problem with that is, when there are peaceful times, soldiers are discarded, like they aren't needed anymore. They're thrown away, pretty much like the boss was just tossed aside, not needed anymore, and used. It's like, that's how he feels. So he wants to create a world where there's a constant war, so soldiers never feel like they don't have a place, or they're never wondering or not knowing what to do, because it's peace. And that's really where him and Snake kind of collide, is on that subject. Is because Snake believes that there is a world beyond war, like he can be more than a soldier. It's like he believes in peace, he believes in living life, and, you know, having an actual life and friends and everything. But Big Boss has kind of like disregarded all that, and kind of shed. It's kind of like he's lost hope in the world, and he's just trying to find his place in it, and he's trying to create a world where he will always have a place, where soldiers will always have a place. He's trying so hard to create a world where what happened to the boss could never happen again. And that's understandable. It's like, that's the thing I like the most about Metal Gear Solid. It's like, even when somebody does kind of like the bad guy things, it's like they're not beyond understanding. It's not just like, I'm doing this bad thing to be a bad guy because I'm a bad guy and that's what happened. No, it all makes sense when you actually look at it from their point of view. But you also see, since we're experiencing that through Solid Snake's point of view, you also see how it is bad. Like, because, I mean, this guy's dragging the entire world into constant war. It's like, you don't want that to happen. That's a bad thing to happen. But we understand why Big Boss is doing it. And we also understand why Snake is trying to stop Big Boss. And it's kind of one of those things where you understand both sides, and it's really, you see what the right thing is to do, but you're really not sure, depending on, like, since you understand both sides, it kind of can pull you either way. And that's what I really like about this series, and what I really respect about it and what it does. And that's what I think is going to happen in Metal Gear Solid 5, is we're going to see basically how Big Boss loses hope in the world. Like, everything is going to be taken away from him, and that pain is still going to be there. That pain, that feeling like the things that you've lost are still there, still haunting you. Like, because the boss never leaves him. What happened that day in that mission, he never forgets. It's like something that he lives with every day of his life. And you can definitely see that, especially in Metal Gear Solid 4. Like, it still bothers him. It still bugs him. It still haunts him. He probably still has nightmares about it. And he tries so hard to get away from it, to try to create a world where that could never happen again, where a nation couldn't just use somebody for their own selfish reasons. But he also believes in the soldier's part of it, because it's what he is, it's what he's been born to do, what he's been made to do, what he's been taught to do by the boss. The boss taught him to be a soldier, to be loyal, and project all these positive things that a soldier projects. But the system is what corrupts it, and he realizes that, and that's what he's trying to fight against. And he never stops fighting against that. And that's really why Big Boss is an amazing character. He has so much depth to him, and it's not like he's a soldier, but he's not really he's not stoic. He's not one of those, like, he's just tough and grit soldiers. It's like, he's tough, but you see his emotional side. It's like, we've seen Big Boss cry like multiple times. And so it's like, you know, he has a heart. You know, he is a person. He's a good person. I believe he is a good person at heart. I just think he's went through some fucked up shit that has fucked up his life, that has fucked up the way he thinks. And that's, like, that's reasonable. It's understandable how that happened, because we've got to see how everything plays out for him. And I'm really interested to see what Metal Gear Solid 5 is going to do. And but yeah, that's just what I wanted to make a video about, wanted to talk to you guys about. What do you guys think about it? Like, what do you think Metal Gear Solid 5 is going to focus on? Like, do you think Big Boss is a bad guy? Do you understand why Big Boss is the way he is? Like, what are your views on the subject, basically? And yeah, just comment below and let me know, and I'll talk to you guys later.